Welcome to the Private Practice Journeys podcast, where mental health professionals learn about the nuts and bolts of private practice by listening to the journeys of 4 therapists that have taken the plunge into private practice. And here's your host, Chris Quarto.
Hey everyone, this is Chris Quarto, and welcome again to Private Practice Journeys. I hope you're having a good week. Well, my week actually got off to a great start because of my great weekend last weekend. My mother and father-in-law came to visit, and we had a great time. Usually my wife and I are playing catch-up on the weekends, trying to get work done. She's a school teacher, and I teach at a university, and so there's a lot of stuff that we have to do. But this gave us a great excuse not to do anything, and it was so wonderful. We got to spend some time at my son's coffee shop up in Nashville, and then go see a play cards. We played euchre, played pinochle, and it was so much fun not to do any work, which is very unusual for us. And I think we have to take a lesson from that and do more of that and learn how to do some more self-care and relaxing and enjoy life every now and then. So it was really wonderful and got us off to a good start this week. So I hope you're having a good week as well. Well, today's podcast episode is with Lisa Duez, and without further ado, here is Lisa. Hi, Journey followers. Welcome again to Private Practice Journeys. I'm Chris Quarto. Well, I'm joined today by Lisa Duez, and she's one of our 4 therapists who are joining me throughout the course of the year to talk about her plunge into private practice. And Lisa, welcome again to the podcast.
Thank you. It's good to talk to you again.
It is. And can you believe we're already in March? It's wonderful just to look at you guys just kind of going into this and taking the plunge and just kind of following you. And I tell you, time moves fast, doesn't it?
It does. It does. It's month 3. I know.
Oh, I know.
And
and speaking of time, that's actually one of the first topics I wanted to talk to you about today, Lisa, was learning how to manage time. And I think that when people go into private practice, they find out pretty quickly that it can be a lot different from having worked in a nonprofit or another type of job. But I'm wondering what you're finding to be the case along those lines of, how to manage your time and what kind of transitions you've had to make. And so why don't you talk a little bit about that today?
Well, I think I struggled a little bit with the boundary of it. I think when you're working for someone and they say your hours are 8 to 5, then that's what you do. But now it's like it just becomes a part of your life, and it's just like your life is your business, and you have to be very careful. And I found that I may have been, I needed to take, I was like, it would bleed over into the weekend a little bit. Like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And I have to do this billing and I want to do this. And then I was like, no, wait a second, just stop. Because I think when you overwork, you kind of become a little resentful of, I'm not, this is taking too much time. And so I just found that I was kind of getting there. Not that I was resenting doing this, because I love this. I think it was a great decision, but just that the realization that you have to work smarter and not harder, to use the old adage.
Sure.
And so I tried to put some different things in place, like, with it's a constant doing notes, seeing people, doing notes, checking up on things, answering calls. It just becomes very routine, but then there are things that throw you off. Often. So I'm trying to learn still a little bit what works best.
Yeah. So you go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Yeah, I was just going to say it's. So what I'm hearing you say is that one of the important things learning just about time is learning how to put boundaries around time and work within those boundaries, or else you can find yourself, what you said, is getting a little bit resentful. And but on the same token, I'm sure that there has to be balance as well in terms of, I heard you say seeing clients doing notes. But I guess there are going to be things that pop up that kind of get in the way of you doing that. And so I guess flexibility would kind of be an important element in terms of managing time too, huh?
Yeah, I had put this little rule in place for myself last week because I was just getting so, I don't know, just kind of like trying to figure out what was the best way. So I said I'm going to deal with one day at a time. So my notes that I did on Monday and my sessions that I would do, just take care of Monday.
Yeah.
Even though it might have been like Wednesday, I'd still be on Monday. Just like close out the day, before, instead of kind of doing random, let me do this person's note and this person's note. And, the way it's my EHR kind of sets up a dashboard for me. So I figured that works out better and I could flip through the days. So I was like trying to figure out that's a way that I can work better. And that seems to be working better. But I think it's kind of just like discovering that for myself through this month, like how to do it smarter. Because you want to spend, there's also a lot of planning that goes into it. And like, you got to really look at the clients that you have coming in and, what do you need to talk to them about and what was the session like last week. And so I find that if I can take time in the morning and then time in the afternoon to kind of deal with the day and then move forward to the next day, that helps.
Right. So
not something I was used to at all.
Yeah. So there's a lot to learn along those lines, and even your duties are different too. Your roles are different from what you had been doing before, which was it was more of an administrative role before, and now it's I'm assuming it's a lot more client contact. So I think even the switch in roles is going to have an impact on how you utilize your time. So I think that's an important thing for the Journey followers to understand too about this plunge into private practice. Well, Lisa, you and I, before we started recording for today's episode, you and I were talking on the phone about things that you had been doing over the weekend and things that you have planned for later this month. And I asked if you could talk a little bit about that, because I think it really relates well to this topic of learning how to manage your time. So let's talk a little bit about what you did this weekend and what you have planned coming up in the future.
Yeah, well, I dared to take time off this weekend. So I went to Savannah and then to Jacksonville. With Savannah, I'm just going to do a plug. Both great cities, but Savannah is absolutely gorgeous.
I've heard that.
Chance to go there. It's beautiful. So saw my niece, just coming to say she's gorgeous little 2-month-old. I'm sorry, I'm just saying it. And then my other niece got married.
Okay.
So it was all about the nieces. So I took off half of Thursday of last week, all of Friday, and then Monday. So now we're on Tuesday, and so that was, revenue loss.
Right.
And I'm also taking off at the end of this month to do something business-wise that's a good opportunity, but will result in me not having any clients for the week. I'm going to training at UVA to become a competency evaluator for juveniles. There's a code section in Virginia that allows social workers to evaluate competency for juveniles if they're certified and trained and do good forensic stuff. So I am excited. It's a good business opportunity, and I supervised competency before, and I love that kind of stuff. But it will result in me, and they're paying for the training, but it will result in me having to spend money on myself in my business role. And then, of course, I don't see clients for the week.
Right.
So
it's that classic.
Like,
it's that classic approach avoidance conflict. There's one thing that really looks good, but on the other hand, there's something negative about it. In your case, it's the loss of income. But I think that the nice thing about this, though, is that you have a lot more flexibility in how you use your time. It's really, you structure it the way you want to, and in this case, for a very good reason, for a good business reason, and that is going through this training is actually going to help increase your business. So there's going to be a payoff in the end. But I think, and this is true, I think, of private practice, is that there are many times that you put in a lot of work at first, hoping and planning for a payoff a little later down the road. And boy, it can be hard to do that, can it?
Yeah, because it's like you don't have the automatic, you did your billing, the insurance is coming in, it's coming, but you're like, is it really coming? Because it's not like a job, where you don't get paid and, I think I'm getting paid. And so I imagine that March will be fine, but I imagine like the week that I took off and a couple of days, I will feel it a little bit in April.
Right.
Maybe, but maybe not. If I can, get more contacts in April or more clients, or maybe what I'm trying to do is I'm going to work on a little bit, couple extra late nights to try to make up for part of it. And then maybe do a couple Saturdays in March to try to make up for it a little bit too.
Sure.
So that it won't be quite so like, oh my gosh, you didn't work for a week, Right. But it does put you in a position where you're very vulnerable, which I'm not used to being, obviously money is a concern, but you're not quite used to being vulnerable to the when you get paid kind of part. You're going to be paid, kind of the if you're going to get paid, and that happens, and then the when, like it's the big like whoa,
right.
What if it doesn't come, or
that's right. And I think that's especially true when you're first starting out, because you're really relying on those checks, on that money to make things go, not only to pay yourself, but to also make a go of the business as well, so you can continue doing what you love doing. And so I think there's a big feeling of anxiety at first when you're first hoping that those checks are gonna be coming in. So let me
and that's what
go ahead.
I was just saying that's why I've just become real disciplined about billing, closing out my day and doing it, so that I know that I have to do what I can do to make sure that part of it gets straight. I don't want to be a slacker, because I know it's happening, so.
Right. And nobody else.
Part of it is being
and nobody else is going to do that but you at this point. I mean,
nobody else is going to do it. Yeah.
That's totally up to you. Right. Exactly. So, well, let me move on to our next topic about learning to develop successful habits. And I had talked before about with Amanda about Stephen Covey writing this book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. You may have heard about it. I think most of the Journey followers have probably heard about that. And I wonder if you're starting to develop some habits to develop into a successful business owners. Is there anything that you've done over the past month that you think, okay, I'm starting to kind of get into this groove, I'm developing these habits, and I'm finding that this is very important for my success as a business owner?
I think so. I think the biggest thing has been, last month I was kind of all over the place with what to do when and schedule, and client would call, they'd come in Tuesday at 6 o'clock knowing full well that probably had a 5:30 or something like that. I had to call that person and cancel. And so being a little bit better with the upfront stuff, the administrative part of it. And I think being more disciplined as far as looking at my whole week, what's going on, making myself a to-do list, and then figuring out from there what really needs to be done, like the priority A, B, and C.
I see.
And it's really it's interesting because with administration, there was always so many tasks.
Right.
But with this, it's kind of like notes, billing, see clients, and then it's like repeat.
Right.
And there's other things, there's marketing. So I try to like each day, as much as I can, put myself on the schedule with marketing. I've kind of carved out Mondays as my lighter client day, and Fridays is my lighter client day. And then the middle of the week is when I really do a lot more seeing people.
Sure.
So it's like I can catch up. So I guess that 7 habits, I was looking at it, so it's probably the discipline part of it that really helped. Because it's like the double-edged sword of, you are in charge of yourself, and it's like, oh, you're in charge of yourself now. Okay. So all of those weaknesses.
Sure.
So those weaknesses that you have, or that those things that you may have, your supervisor may have told you in your evaluation that you needed to bone up on.
Right.
You still probably need to bone up on them when you're in business.
Yeah, it's like, that's what they were talking about.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like I need to develop some time management skills. Oh,
right.
So, yeah. So I think it's that, and I think I've spent a lot of time on quality this month. I really, my last month, I was getting all these just EAP referrals, and I don't think I was really well known. And now I'm kind of getting more of my ideal client, which is more of the deeper, work with the trauma and EMDR. And I'm a little scared to do the EMDR because that's a really very labor intensive sometimes. And I was like, oh, no, I'm doing it. And so I was like, I need to get a mentor. So I had a friend of mine that I go and I do my consultation now. I'm like, I need to really hone in on my craft. And so that's the other thing was that sharpen the saw stuff.
Right.
Is that Stephen Covey? Yeah.
Well, it sounds like for you, it's there have been a few things that you've done, and part of this has been more on the, I guess, on the organizational side or the administrative side of the practice, where you've kind of learned how to schedule things, how to identify, how to talk to clients about schedule their schedules, or who you want to actually have as a client. And then on the other side of the equation, on the clinical side, you've kind of looked at how can I hone my craft in EMDR and really, zero in on that and develop that into more of a habit. I guess we'll call it a habit, but it's really more of a craft where you're feeling more competent about what you're doing, and you can really help people.
Yeah, and I think it was the realization when a client came in with some trauma, and I was like, talk with her, and then I'm like, why are you not doing EMDR, Lisa? Why are you not doing this stuff? You know how to do it. Yeah. You can help her.
Right.
You don't have to sit here and talk to her about it the whole time. We can do something. And she's perfectly, so it's kind of like, what are you doing?
Yeah, sometimes you have to convince yourself, don't you?
Yeah, you do. And I think you get I think when we open our businesses, we worry. Obviously, we know how to do the clinical part. You know how to do the therapy, but you don't know how to do the business. So you almost concentrate more on the business part, and then it's like, phew, it's just a bunch of EAP people. I can do it in my sleep,
Sure.
But then I think as soon as that evened out, I was like, okay, now I can do the stuff that I really want to do. And it was funny. Once that happened, they start flowing in. I shouldn't be the real, my ideal client.
Isn't that great? That's wonderful.
Isn't that weird? Yeah, it's weird how that happened.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about self-care. And this is self-care. When I was in graduate school, we didn't even really talk about this. And I think I've seen it pop up in the literature, probably in the last 5 or 10 years. It's really become more important. And I think there's a lot to it in terms of caring for yourself as a therapist. And I wonder just for you, if you found anything that's happened over the past couple of months where you've thought to yourself, oh my gosh, I really need to slow down, or I need to care for myself. And if so, how do you go about doing that, Lisa?
I think that I'm a very, a little bit more of an anxiety-prone person. And I think once I kind of felt myself over-worrying, like not normal, And I think I was like, one day I was texting somebody and I was like, I'm not going to get any clients. I'm just, just like the panic. And they were like, settle down, it's like settle down. And I think I realized I just needed to kind of settle down. And I was trying to when you do anxiety, you over control.
Sure.
And I think I was just maybe trying too hard a little bit. Because I was like, this has to work, and it does have to work, but it also has to work the right way. And so I kind of just, that's when I kind of decided a little bit more about my schedule and not being so random about, what time you want to come in? Okay, Tuesday, whatever time, that's good for me, and just saying, these are your hours. Monday, this is your hours. Tuesday, you work this. Wednesday, you work that.
Sure.
Thursday, those are, your hours. And then just, for self-care, I've always journaled. I feel like I just need to dump sometimes, and just exercising and making sure I do something fun, and remembering why I got into this was to be able to have, not only to be a business owner, but to be able to be a little bit more autonomous and take vacations, and, go to kids' baseball games and that kind of thing, and just like, realizing on a holistic part, making the business work for the life instead of the life work for the business.
Right.
So it was a good shift. Yeah.
That's a good point. Well, so for you, it sounds like your signs are that if you start to worry excessively about things, that's a sign for you that, I need to back off and do something differently, or I need to do journaling, or I need to do something to take care of myself. Is there anything else that you know about yourself, Lisa, besides the excessive worry, that would be another sign that, okay, now this is happening now, I time for me to take a break or whatnot?
I think it's more of, it's funny because in the notes you were talking about your family coming along.
Yeah.
I just had to laugh. I know we ain't got to that yet, but I think when they start looking at me like, Mom, you're wigging out, or something like that, or when my own mother calls me, is like, are you okay? And I'm like, shoot. I think it's other people say to you, you're not. What's going on? This is not normal.
Well, let's talk about that, because that's a good segue into our next topic here, which is learning how private practice and personal relationships kind of go hand in hand. And so you're kind of talking about family, and it could be friends and colleagues. It could be a lot of different people, and but that's true. I mean, when you go into private practice, family members can come along for the ride, and for good or for bad, I guess. But let's talk a little bit about your experiences so far. So this is we're doing this interview in March, and so you've been in private practice for a couple of months now. So what's that been like? What have you noticed has changed in your relationships with your family, or maybe things haven't changed? Or how you've had to kind of do things differently, or look at things differently from that personal relationship perspective?
A little bit. I think I have a husband of almost 20 years and two boys that are teenagers. One is 17 and one is 14. And they have been very supportive. My husband has been very, very supportive.
Wonderful.
I think I'm blessed. I know that that's not always the case. Now, he's also very pragmatic. So he's kind of like proofs in the pudding kind of thing. So, he's always kind of gone along with it. We had always talked about me going into private practice, but we've always said later. Like, he's a police officer.
Okay.
So, which I tell him he's a social worker with a gun. So we're both social workers. So and it was always later. And then as, my private practice unfolded, my journey, it was kind of like, okay, now is okay. And he has always said he doesn't care what I do as long as we need to make the bills. And I get that. And, I think just very pragmatic with him about, with me about, I don't even know. We talked about it the other day, and he's like, I really don't know how much money you're making. And I'm like, well, I really don't know how much money I'm making either. So he's like, what? But I said, I know I'm making more than what I made at my private practice or at my business. So they've been very supportive. They're learning like I'm learning.
Sure.
And his concern is obviously the pay.
Yeah.
Just how to get paid, when to get paid, and I think, I guess, and maybe you answer this question for me, as you're in business more, it becomes more stable, I assume.
That's right.
Right?
Yes.
Right.
That's exactly right. And that's what I was going to say. I think that one of the tough things for family members, and my wife and I went through this when I first was in private practice, it's the unpredictability of the income stream.
Yeah.
And not knowing until you develop your clientele and you have people coming in on a regular basis, and that's reflected in the income, that starts to become more stable as your clientele starts to become stable. So I think that at first it's kind of like a roller coaster ride, and kind of how I look
really
at that with the family. And it's like I say, the family members are coming along for the ride, and it can be nerve-wracking at times.
Mm-hmm. Because it's not like, sometimes you're always thinking about the business, and even when you're out, you're, who can I talk to? Did this person know this person? And
right.
It becomes more of your identity than just, I have a job and I work at this place and I'm an administrator, or I'm a therapist at this nonprofit. It becomes more of like, it doesn't really leave you, but you have to allow it. You have to let it leave you a little bit. You know what I'm saying? You have to have the boundary. So he's been great. I think he's still a little skeptical, but I think he's, coming along. But we've made an agreement that, look, if it doesn't work, I have to go back and get a job. I'm like, I have a job.
Yeah.
So it works, and the kids have been good. They're excited. Teenage boys, they could care less. In the part way, but
well, let me ask.
They're like,
no, go ahead.
My mom's a business owner. Yeah, they were like, oh, Mom, this is really good. So that's good.
That's cool. Well, let me ask you this, and it kind of goes back to your husband. How did you know that this was the right time to go into private practice, and did you have to do much convincing of your husband that now is the right time? Because, you always had these conversations of, oh, I'll do this later. But how did that all happen? And, what were those conversations like?
Oh, gosh. I think at first he was like, I was like, the job situation, I don't know if you know my story, but the job was very toxic.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Knew I needed to change jobs and started looking and didn't find really what I wanted. And then I had a friend that had an office, and I think I broached the idea. And I think for a while he kind of thought like, she's doing this thing on the side and she's just experimenting. She got this little project, going on, where I started to, really, and I said, hey, I got credentialed with this one. I got credentialed with this one. I've financed my office. I teach part-time at a community college. I was able to finance my office stuff with that. And
okay.
Then I was like, ready to resign. And it just kind of became more and more and more. And I guess I just kind of educated, and, I kept saying along the line of, is this what you want to do? Will this work? And, is this really going to work?
Sure.
And, and he just said, I think it will. He said, but you just have to know that we have these obligations, and if it doesn't, then you have to be ready to do something else.
Right.
And so I think it was a very slow and steady conversation because he didn't know about it either. And, I kind of, I guess since he's a police officer, I said, well, it's kind of like being an attorney where you have your own practice. It's just not law, it's clinical social work.
Okay.
And therapy. So I think he kind of looked at it a little bit, and it just worked out. I think I got him about 90% on board.
Okay. Well, it sounds like
Maybe 85.
what helped though is that you kept him in the loop. I mean, through this whole
I very much kept him in the
process.
loop. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said about that. So that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Well, you kind of alluded to something that kind of brings us to our last topic for today, Lisa, and that has to do with learning to develop a private practice mindset or an identity, because you were working for a nonprofit before in an administrative role.
Yeah.
And I think, they certainly have their philosophies about how to help people. And I think really the social work profession has a philosophy of how they work with people. And now you're transitioning into for-profit, which is much different. So what's that been like for you to kind of switch from one identity to another? I suppose maybe you're still in the process of doing that, huh?
I am, but it's funny you should say that. Earlier this month, I had went to probation and parole over here to do a presentation about my services. And they were asking me, do I accept insurance and self-pay and all that stuff? And I was like, well, and do I have a sliding scale? And I was like, well, I do. And what's your minimum fee? And I was like, oh. So I gave him a number. And I was like, oh, great. We could probably fill those 2 slots in like a week. And I said, gave him a number. And then I said, some in my head said, Lisa, only if you do a self-pay and you do a sliding scale, you only can do it for 2 slots a week or something like that.
Okay.
And then, so I was like, so it's this much an hour and I have 3 slots and one of them is already full. 3 slots a week or something like that. They can only take sliding scale certain times, because you look at reimbursement, it was just like you get this average, it's such a long continuum of how much you actually insurances pay.
Right.
So then I was just laughing, and my friend that was with me, she was doing her business, and she said, your social worker's showing. And I'm like, not my business worker, my social worker. And so, social workers are very much like helping the disenfranchised.
Yes.
It's drilled into your head.
Uh-huh.
And I would never probably be able to let someone go without mental health treatment that can afford it.
Mm-hmm.
But that being said, I also have a business to run. And if I become the social worker that just lets everybody come in and not pay, and, I can't eat.
That's right.
So I have kind of gotten to the point where I've had to have conversations with some clients about, this is, and it's funny because you always think the conversations are going to go worse than what they do.
Right.
This is how much you owe. This is it. And they're like, okay, here's the card. And I'm like, oh God, it was easy. But I think it's more of trying to develop that you're the service.
Yes.
And that you're worth money.
Mm-hmm.
And that people come and pay you, so that you need to keep being able to do it. So in order to be able to do it, you have to be responsible with it.
Right.
And that's the part where it's like, I am providing a service to the community. Yes, I can, offer discounted a couple slots a week. I can do that within my budget. That's okay. But it's not a free for all. I can't do it for everyone. And it's that's the part about being a business owner, because you didn't have to make that decision, those type of decisions, when you were working for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
At all. You just had to show up to work.
Right.
And so it's kind of like now it's out in the community where this is me, this is what I do, this is who I can help, and this is what I can offer other people. And it's slow to build, but slow to develop. I think I'm still getting there.
Right, and you were talking about having conversations with clients about this is what I charge and blah blah blah. I wonder, though, if you had to have a lot of conversations with yourself to make the change from it's okay to be charging this much. It's okay to be doing this. And I think that there's there's so much that, that shift from what you had been and how you viewed yourself and what your role was to now as the business owner. There's a lot of, I think, a lot of talking to yourself that you have to do, and maybe talking to other people too, who have either gone through this or are in business. And but it's a gradual process, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of a it's like when you're doing therapy, you're selling a product, and I had those conversations with myself. Was that session good enough for them, or was that good enough for you? Like if you have a session that you're kind of off, or you just maybe don't have the best session or something like that, and because you're not always going to, is that the best you can offer? And it's almost like that negative stuff, that comes through about, are you worthy?
Sure.
Like, oh gosh.
Yeah, because you wanna offer something that's of value, of course, but I certainly. And I certainly get what you're saying, because everybody's going to have sessions where they're just off, and that happens. Just like everybody's going to have fantastic sessions as well from time to time. Oh, yeah. So, yeah. But I think that... Yeah,
and I think it's just...
Oh, go ahead.
I don't know. I was just saying, I think it's just rolling with it at times. It's tough to... It's tough to not be hard on yourself, I think, when you're out there on your own and you definitely feel vulnerable.
Yes.
You are out there, and at any point it could just, maybe not work.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's like a daily, it's a daily thing where you always have to be on. You can't slack any, and I don't mean like you're constantly crazy. I just think that you have to realize that you're the product.
Yes, that makes total sense. And some people really thrive on that risk of, this might not work, and, all that kind of stuff. And other people, it drives them crazy to think, oh my gosh, I have to make this work. So
I'm probably in the middle. Yeah. I'm in the middle. I'm learning to put myself out there a little bit more. Like social media. Everybody's all over social media with their business, and I'm like, okay, I'm just starting. I'm a Facebook page is safe.
Sure.
Businesses,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like kind of like, where's the boundary? Like, you have a job, you can be very autonomous. I work here, I'm going to go home, I'm off. You have a business, you're out there.
Yes.
I saw one of my clients in the grocery store. They're like, "There's my therapist," and I'm like, "Oh, geez." That
reminds me. When I interviewed for my first private practice job, the guy who was interviewing me said that he had an experience where he was in a Piggly Wiggly, which is a supermarket, and saw a client in there. The client spotted him and just made a beeline for the opposite part of the store. It's really interesting to see how clients react. Some of them will just come up and, hey, how's it going? And, other people just, avoid you or whatever. It's a really interesting thing.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting. It's definitely an identity shift.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah, and I think too.
But it's not true.
I just want to mention before you go on is I was just thinking when we were talking about are you providing something that's of value? I think that it's not only, you're at a different point in your life, but if you look at people who are just coming out of graduate school and wanting to do this private practice thing, they struggle with this too. Can I really do this? And, I'm just out of graduate school. Can I provide a service and charge X amount for it? And so I think everybody goes through this at some point in time. And so it's not an uncommon thing, but it's just something that you work through,
Yeah, it's funny because I do supervision, and my supervisees, they've been with me for a year or so, and they've been with me through this transition, so they're learning, and so we're talking, and I'm like, it's so funny. The other day I was like, we got to talk about this case, and I was like, I should bring up that case, and I don't know what to do with. See what they have to say. But they're going through, and I thought I was talking with one of them about it, and I was like, gosh, we're kind of in the same boat.
Yeah.
And I'm like, and you're looking to me for the experience. I'm supposed to be the one with the experience, and
right.
I'm going through this vulnerability thing. So it's just really it's interesting. And they're like, it's so cool that we get to see it. And I'm like, oh yeah, it's wonderful.
Yeah, it's I get that's a parallel process that you're going through. It's a real interesting type of deal. Yeah. Well, Lisa, we're at the end of our interview today. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you or check out your website, how can they do that?
It's lisaduez.com, LISADUEZ.com. And then I'm on Facebook, same way. And I do have an Instagram now. So I'm not scared of social media entirely. And that's Lisa Dewey, LCSW.
Okay,
in
wonderful.
Virginia Beach, Virginia. Looking forward to going to the beach soon.
Oh, that sounds so good. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast again today, Lisa. And I can't wait to talk to you next month just to see how the training went and all those kind of things.
Yeah, it'll be good. It'll be good.
Wonderful. Okay, so I'll talk to you next month.
All right. All right. Thank you, Chris. Take care.
Okay, bye-bye. Wow, just listening to that last part of Lisa's interview about when she was talking about feelings of vulnerability, and I think that's common for anybody that goes into this field, into private practice, to feel as though I just quit my job, and I'm putting myself out there. I don't know if this is going to work. What happens if I don't get clients? What happens if I don't bring in income? And will people see through me? That imposter syndrome. Will they really see me as a fake, that I don't know what I'm doing? There are different types of things that different therapists deal with. And I think for you to realize that if you're interested in taking the plunge, for you to understand that this is typical, this is common, and that this is something that you work through. It's part of the process of developing into a private practitioner. But you know what? You can do this. Just listen to these episodes of what the therapists are going through and how they go through this as a developmental process. And you can do this if you want to. Listen to them, get some ideas for what you can do if you want to take the plunge, and start to plan out what your strategy is going to be. So those are my thoughts of today's episode. I thought that this was really interesting stuff that Lisa talked about today, and I appreciate her coming on the podcast to do this. Well, if you want the show notes for today's episode, please visit my website, chrisquarto.com, CHRISQUARTO.com, and you can get all the show notes. You can also find all the past episodes there, too, if you want to listen to those. I think that's all for today. Have a great rest of the week.